Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming for this great event. My name is Michaela Greenan, and I'm a partner with PwC, and I'm the chair of the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. I do want to spend a couple of minutes to just give you a little bit of overview on what we as the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston are doing. The mission of the Council is to promote a deeper understanding of the world, its people, politics, economics, and culture, and to enable Houston community to participate more effectively in the global community. The Council believes in free and fair discussions. As a non-profit, non-partisan organization, the Council promotes dialogue and understanding through the exchange of ideas and perspectives in an open, respectful environment. And it serves as a platform that bridges the gap between our local and our global neighbors in an increasingly interconnected world. The Council has over 7,000 members and hosts over 80 events every year that are open to the general public. We strive to bring a wide range of speakers on timely topics, such as our next week event on May 31st on Wednesday, when we will host Leopoldo Lopez Gil, political activist and father of imprisoned Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez Mendoza. I hope we'll see a lot of you there next Wednesday. Our education department holds over 20 programs each year that engage thousands of students, teachers, and professors from over 55 different area middle schools, high schools, and universities. Today, we are delighted to have over 30 students from 5 different high schools with us. I don't see them anywhere, but over there. They are from the Episcopal Lutheran Memorial, Northside and Waltrip, and San Maribon High School. And this fortunate group of students will have their own meeting with Jeff Immelt after this meeting. And the Council also awards academic scholarships each year to deserving and accomplished students. And I'm delighted to have 2 of our recent scholarship recipients here this afternoon. And will you please join me in recognizing Nidia Martinez, who is the recipient of a $5,000 scholarship. And Alina Rodriguez, also from North High School, and she is a recipient of $3,500 scholarship. Thank you. Now I would like to welcome to the stage Jalisa Tolliver, Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for the Chevron Pipeline Company and a member of the board of the Houston World Affairs Council. She will give us an overview of the incredible legacy of Jesse H. Jones.
So be assured that I promised my fellow board members I would be brief. I was going to say I was standing between you and lunch, but I see we've already had lunch, so I won't be able to say that. I'm so pleased to be here today as an employee of Chevron and as a member of the board of directors of the World Affairs Council of Houston. The accomplishments of Jesse H. Jones are too numerous to state fully today, but I would like to provide just a bit of background so that everyone knows why we honor this great Houstonian, and then also why we connected to our honoree, Mr. Immelt, today. Jesse H. Jones was born in Robertson County, Tennessee in 1874, and he got his start in business at a very young age. At the age of 24, he moved to Houston to manage his uncle's estate and work as a general manager of one of the family's large lumber yards. During this time, he established his own business, the South Texas Lumber Company, and he ventured into real estate and banking. Within just a few years, he was the largest developer in all of Houston. And in 1920, he married the love of his life, Mary Gibbs. In this period before World War I, he also brought part of the Houston Chronicle, was one of the original investors in Immelt Oil Company, and was as chairman of the Houston Harbor Board, he raised money to dredge and open the Houston Ship Channel. So you can see the impact that he's had on our city. In 1940, Jones was appointed the 9th U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Following World War II, he returned to private business and continued his incredible and far-reaching philanthropic endeavors. Today, the Houston Endowment, founded by Jones, is one of the nation's largest institutions, which continues his legacy of enriching the Houston community and providing access to education for thousands of Houstonians, including an emphasis on women and minority students. It is befitting that the council hold this annual event in honor of Jesse H. and Mary Gibbs Jones, as Jesse H. Jones is credited with transforming the city of Houston into a hub of international commerce. He also recognized that the success of business leaders and civic leaders was directly linked to the health of the communities. Along the way, as evidenced by their broad philanthropic efforts, Jesse and Mary Gibbs Jones also never forgot about the importance of helping others. Chevron is pleased to support the World Affairs Council again this year. The council brings us fascinating speakers on relevant issues from around the globe. The topics and speakers are as diverse as our wonderful city. These programs also provide the opportunity for us to network with fellow leaders and build bridges on issues of mutual concern. We believe the young professional group and the education programs ensure that our future leaders will be well informed and have the collective resources to engage others on critical global issues. We salute Jeffrey Immelt, CEO of General Electric, for their contributions to the international life of our city. And on a final note, we extend our appreciation to the World Affairs Council staff for another wonderful event. Thank you.
I would like to ask Ken Topman from Conoco, another board member, sorry, looking for my notes, to the podium. And Ken is Vice President Subsurface for ConocoPhillips.
Thanks, Michaela. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to Houston, global city of technology and innovation, and particularly to welcome and then introduce our honoree, Jeffrey Immelt. Jeff is the chairman and CEO of GE, a post he's held since 2001. He's occupied several global leadership positions since going to GE in 1982, including roles in GE Plastics, appliances, and healthcare. In 1989, he became an officer of the company and joined GE Capital Board in 1997. In 2000, Mr. Immelt was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer. He was the chair of President Obama's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. He's also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and has lots of other activities. He earned a BA degree in Applied Mathematics from Dartmouth College and an MBA from Harvard University. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Jeffrey Immelt.
Jeff, sorry.
Get over here. Are we good? Like Charlie Rose.
So I just want to introduce really quick Alan Crane, who just joined us on the podium as well. Alan, for the ones who don't know him, he is a board member of the World's Affairs Council, Greater Houston, as well as a former chairman, and one, if not our favorite, interviewer. And for the ones who were wondering why Jeff got a book, it's about Jesse Jones, so we thought that was the most appropriate gift to give him with the award.
Great, thanks. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
Jeff, thank you for being here. It's an honor
Thank you.
to be on the same stage
It's
with
good
you
to be
again.
with you.
So you take over as Chairman CEO in the beginning of the 21st century. Must have been a great feeling to be the Chairman CEO now. And everything is going to be easy. The United States is the only superpower. What could go wrong? What could be hard about running a big company that was, you have the mandate going back to Thomas Edison. So I know it's all been just fun and easy. So tell us a little bit about when you first joined, what GE looked like, and what now under your leadership over these many years it looks like today, particularly as we sit here in Houston. Texas is the largest exporting state. I hope everybody here knows that. And I hope also all of us Houstonians, and Jeff's a Houstonian today, this is our International Citizen of the Year Award, knows that the Houston metropolitan area is the largest exporting area in the United States. So we're very focused on international business. You're very focused on international business.
Great.
But tell us how that's
Great, Alan.
changed.
So first, let me say I'm really honored by the award. And I joined GE in 1982, and 80% of our revenue was inside the United States. And in 2017, almost 70% of our revenue is going to be outside the United States. So that's really, if you will, kind of one generation of American leadership, how much the world has changed. I think if you think, Alan, back to kind of, let's say, the line of demarcation around, kind of 9/11, governance, things like that, kind of 2001, if I were going to sit down and write down every way that the world has changed between 2007 and 2001, we would still be here at midnight, right? So I think a lot of you have lived it, but kind of I've lived it from, let's say, the front seat of the car in many ways. 3 recessions. If you go back to 2001, the U.S. had gone through the 1990s and had 4% GDP growth, no inflation. The world was at peace. Subsequent, you've got kind of 3 recessions, global unrest, populism. So all those things have been a part of what we've lived in. I would say in 15 years, Alan, in the company, we've really driven 5 big changes. One is portfolio. We were the classic conglomerate. So we were in TV business, the aviation business, the healthcare business. We did pet insurance. We did everything you can imagine as a conglomerate. So we made the company, I would say, narrower and deeper. We made the company much more global. So by design, we kind of globalized the company dramatically, changed the footprint, changed where people live. I remember the first time as CEO, now I'm already taking over the company, I could take on the tour of the world, but let's say the first time I did a business review in Latin America as CEO of the company, everybody in Sao Paulo flew in from Miami, right? An American company in those days, the Latin America headquarters was in Fort Lauderdale. And you had to say, hey guys, look, I've been to Fort Lauderdale, I've been to Rio. They're different, So dragging a company globally. The third thing was really to make the company more technically based. And I would say, if anything, whether you're in oil and gas or any business you're in, you just can't fake technology today. In many ways, any moat you build around your business is built around innovation and technology of some kind. We've invested big in digital, right? So we've kind of tried to lead that pivot in terms of the intersection between digitalization and analytical assets. We've done that. And then I think the fifth thing I would say is we've really broadly, the company I grew up in was very central risk-based, very central process-based. The GE of today is very decentralized, more risk-based. So those are kind of 5 big, I would say, secular changes that we've kind of led from the front in a very visible way over the last 15 years. And, it wasn't that we wasn't that I wanted to be different than my predecessor or we wanted the company to do this or the other thing. It's just trying to anticipate, you know, where does the world go? 80% of our gas turbines and jet engines from 2001 to today, 80% have been sold outside the United States. The previous decade, 80% of our gas turbines and jet engines were sold inside the United States. So unless you're fast on your feet as you go through these pivots, you just get left behind. Now, through that time, we decided to invest in oil and gas. And it wasn't to time the price of the industry. Our theory of the case in your industry was that technical intensity would grow. So if you go back and look at presentations I would make to my board in 2002 or 2003, I would say the aviation industry invests 8% of revenue back into R&D. The oil and gas industry is 1%. High-risk assets, very difficult environments. Our thesis was that was going to change and that we could be part of that process as it took place over the years. I think that's by and large been proven to be true. Now, again, the other thing you learn in the industry, it's more fun at $100 than it is at 40, right? But, you know, you can't control everything. So those are just a few of the changes in the world and in the company.
And I've heard about that you're increasing really your exposure to the oil and gas business and the service side. Something's going on in that space.
Yeah, no, a little bit. You might know about it personally, but you know, I would say when we first started investing, there was a clear, let's say, 3 clear places of the industry. You had kind of the E&P side, really, which is, we don't bring any essential strength to that. There was a technology side and there was a service side. And one of the things that's happened over the last 15 years is the technology and the service sides have really blurred, broadly speaking. So, and I think if you go forward into the future, kind of the way we've thought about life is, you know, nobody knows for sure, but look, clearly productivity, things like that are going to be more important to the industry. I think when we look at assets, service, information, and balance sheet, it gives us the flexibility in an industry like this to forward lean if the world goes CapEx to OpEx or different business models. So what you find about change is that while we all get used to talking about technical change, I'd say today it's equal parts technology and business model. And we've kind of, I think you know, we're looking forward to the merger with Baker Hughes because I think it's going to give us flexibility on both the technical side and on the business model side, and ultimately to be a better supplier to our customers. And that's really what we want to be.
Well, Jeff, right now, GE's in 180 countries doing business. The United Nations is made up of 193 countries. Some would argue there's 194 recognized countries because Taiwan's not in the UN. But the point is, so you're in 93% of all the countries in the world. And you've made a statement sometime in the past year that companies need to have their own perspective, even their own foreign policy. Can you tell us what you're thinking about in that regard and what you mean by that?
So, you know, it's always, you know, because everybody in this room, I think, is kind of, you know, you've grown up basically the way I have in terms of globalization and things like that. And probably if I asked for a show of hands and said, how many people in this room believe in free trade and trade deals, everybody would raise their hand. The problem is nobody else in Houston agrees with you, right? Nobody else in the country, nobody else in China agrees with you, nobody else in France agrees with you. Our fellow citizens have kind of given up on this process. So when I talk about this, I'm not really talking, you know, one of the most important things for business people is you have to be willing to change even when you don't necessarily believe, you know, even when you say, well, I don't, you know, I think free trade's a good thing. But the problem we're in today is it's going to change with or without us. So President Trump didn't invent protectionism. I would say the Chinese kind of perfected it. It goes on in Europe. It goes on in almost every country. Prime Minister Modi, who I really respect, he just announced a Make in India program last week. So let's say the world that we grew up in of trade deals and globalization is a good thing. This is going to come apart, and it's a multitude of different reasons. I would say, you know, China was a big player. I would say the Davos crowd lost sight of what was going on the ground. I would say American business people like me, We thought we could move jobs wherever we wanted to with no consequence. I could go down the list, right? But we are where we are right now. And so what we built, Alan, is a very local structure. So we have inside our company, we have probably for the last decade, we believe very much in localizing decision-making, localizing leadership. So if you went to see GE in China, we have 23,000 people in China, led by a Chinese woman, entire Chinese staff, 20 factories, yada, yada. That's globalization. The globalization of the 1980s was wage arbitrage. It was people like GE shutting down factories in the US and moving them to Mexico. Those days are largely over, right? In other words, that's not a winning global strategy. We globalize today because we want to win in Saudi Arabia. We want to win in Mozambique. We want to win. We think every corner of the world, if we get a fair fight, let me tell you straight out, not that we're great because we can still lose a lot of times, but if we get a fair fight outside of the United States against a Chinese company, we're going to win 100 times out of 100, right? So we've kind of equipped ourselves to be in this mode. Now, what I say inside our company, we've had 70 years of the World Trade Organization and all these institutions to learn how to be a global company. We should be able to do this on our own. In other words, we shouldn't need to go to Washington, D.C. for anything. A small business is in a different situation than we are. But after 70 years of practicing globalization, if we still need to go to D.C. like a big baby on everything, there's something really wrong with us. So that's kind of how we've thought about our company. Make no mistake, let me end where I began. We believe in globalization. We think it's a force for good. We believe in NAFTA. We believe in TPP. We believe in all those. We believe in the European Union. We believe in all those things. But we don't need it as a company. We built a company where we can survive and we can navigate and we can manage complexity. And it's not easy to do that, but that's kind of the way we've run our company. So in the first quarter of this year, we've got about an $85 billion franchise outside the United States. Its orders were up 20% in the first quarter of the year. So that's kind of and Africa was zero when I became CEO. We've got a $6 billion company in Africa today. So we basically don't allow excuses on globalization. And we have our own kind of, I guarantee if you're interested in China, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNBC, they don't know anything about China fundamentally, right? You're not going to be able to read an unbiased story anywhere in the United States. You better go see it for yourself. And we've kind of trained ourselves to kind of go see things for ourselves. So
Let's follow up a little then, because you've mentioned China, you've mentioned India, the ASEAN 5. You take their rates of GDP growth.
Yeah.
And China's still over 6%, may come down a little bit. Stay over 6% is projected for the next 5 years. The U.S. is fighting hard to stay at around 2%.
Yeah.
Europe's doing better, but they're still pretty low. How do we compete going forward when you've got, I think, 9 of the 15 top performing economies are in Asia Pacific, and those are the people we're competing with?
I think it's a great question. First, I would say to everybody in this room, and again, most of my knowledge is just from experience, but Asia's for real. So I think anybody that is running a company but doesn't have a strategy for China and India or the ASEAN region, you're making a mistake. And so, I'd say my big point is we need engagement. It's not that we need, complicated deals like TPP, but the U.S. needs at least bilateral relationships with China and India and Vietnam and some of the other countries around the world. But as business people in this room, even if the United States doesn't reach out, you're going to have to reach out on your own. Indonesia and Vietnam, two countries that aren't on the beaten path. If you're in Chevron, you know Indonesia well, or if you're on Exxon, you know Vietnam. Those two countries in the next decade are going to purchase 30 gigawatts of gas power generation, 30 gigawatts. Over the next decade, they'll be bigger than the United States in terms of consumption of new products. So it doesn't do me any good to sit here. That's where the action is. And so I'd say for all of us, that's where the action is for a long time. So we've got to be more basic in Asia. And then I think for our kids, I just don't know how we protect them from the competitiveness that's going to be required in the 21st century that's going to come out of people that are hungry, that want more, and that are willing to kind of compete for it. So I think the other thing that I owe everybody that comes to work for GE, I feel like what I owe them is kind of what are the right tools to be competitive over the course of their lifetime. And we've got to hope that our own children have the same, kind of fight in them, because, one of the hardest things about watching politics right now, although there's a lot of fun things about watching it right now also, I think, as you guys would agree, but is the opportunity cost. So, in other words, while we waste time, other people aren't wasting time. And we've got 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's GDP. That's not sustainable unless you're willing to fight for it. And that's what we have to capture inside our companies and inside our schools and every place else.
So you mentioned the administration and their policies. Let's talk about that a little. 1979 was the high year for employment and manufacturing in the United States, and it's fallen since then, or close to 40 years. But today we produce more than we've ever produced, with a much smaller proportion of people because of increases in productivity and technology, money of which GE's helped drive. So where do we see the future in the United States for employment? That's one of the things, one of the criticisms of globalization is wage stagnation, loss of jobs. Do you see the government having to step in and do retraining, to provide education?
It's a great question. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, the entire election of 2016 was kind of a debate about how do we create, $25 an hour manufacturing jobs. I mean, if you had to put one theme, whether it was on Secretary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or anybody else, it was around that theme. And the answer is, if it was easy, we'd have more of them today. So some statistics, what Alan just went through, it's basically, let's say 21 or 22% of U.S. jobs in that time period were manufacturing jobs. Now it's roughly 9%. Productivity has grown markedly. I always think it's helpful to compare us to Germany and not China. So Germany, the number's 24%. Germany is a huge net exporter with every country in the world, including the United States. So what do they have? What does Germany have? Germany has training programs, amazing trade and training programs. Banks like, kind of the Landesbanks, so the community banks in Germany, they have to lend money to small businesses, right? It's not about ROE and stuff like that. They're basically put on earth to give money to the small and medium enterprise. A little bit different than the U.S., right? Very active SME base, huge SME base, and a country that thinks exports 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, right? What do we have? We've lost sight of our training programs. It's the hardest period. There's been fewer small business creation since the global financial crisis than in any other period in our history. We don't have an export-import bank. I would say there's no premium at all on exports. In fact, the tax code hurts exporters, not importers. So, I would say now, what could that all add to? Maybe we could go from 9% to 12% or 13%. You're not going to go back to where we were just because of productivity. But I would argue to all of you that one of the reasons why we have such a trade deficit as a country right now is because we really haven't tried. We really haven't put any premium at all on fighting and winning outside the United States. So, could the government do some things around that? Sure it could, right? Tax reform, training and education, fix our infrastructure, right? Really, it would be, my first trip to China, was in the mid-1980s. Basically, every flight had to go in through Hong Kong. So you would basically fly into Hong Kong, and you might have one or two, and the airports had no restrooms or things like that. Now that's like JFK, right? JFK looks like a third world airport, and you're leaving from Shanghai, it looks amazing. So infrastructure, tax reform, regulatory reform, focus on exports. President Trump should get up every day and say, we're going to have a level playing field. In other words, I'm not going to tell you China, we're not going to do restrictions, stuff like that. Here's what we're going to say. Everything that you're able to do in the U.S., we have to be able to do in China, right? Chinese company can buy a company in the United States. American company can't buy a company in China. Right? I could go down the list. So I would just wave this flag of level playing field each and every day, fix our infrastructure, fix the things that benefit, not GE, but everybody. Because again, I go back to my premises. We're trying to prepare our company so that we're going to be okay no matter what happens. You know, I argued very hard on the XM Bank, but the reason why I felt like I could afford to be very vocal on that wasn't because we needed it, it was because we didn't need it. In other words, we could move jobs to France or Canada or other places to take advantage of their export banks when we shut ours down. Most other people in this room, you don't have that luxury. You know, so in some ways we were the right person to carry the flag because we had less to lose if it didn't happen, right? So in some ways we have to play that. So I would say we don't try hard when it comes to the focus on global competitiveness. I think if we tried harder, the trade deficits would be lower and we could create more manufacturing jobs. But to your point, Alan, the wave of productivity is huge. You know, GE's investing a lot in additive manufacturing. You know, that's a big thrust for us. The good news of that is everybody that really works on the line in additive manufacturing, they're going to make $30 or $35 an hour, all of them. And they can afford to make that much money. The bad news is there's going to be fewer jobs in the supply chain and things like that. So the wave of productivity is never ending.
Jeff, as you know, we're an education-focused organization, whether it be events like this for all of you, or particularly our high school outreach program. You saw two of our outstanding people who have scholarships. So I think 3 years ago when we were talking, I mentioned my sister worked at GE for many years, and one of the things she really relished was the type of continuing education that's offered. So could you talk a little bit about the philosophy of the most important asset you have at GE is the people and how you help them refresh and learn and go forward?
Yeah, no, so I think it's just, what's a common culture in GE is it's very much of a learning organization, a very, an organization that we don't feel like we do anything the best, and we feel like we can learn more. You know, I've had this incredible good fortune in my lifetime to have a career and a job where I could get smarter every day. You know, now it was up to me to take those advantages, and some days I did and some days I didn't, but we had that opportunity. And so what we try to do in our company is find ways to make people smarter every day. We invest about $1 billion a year in training, so we invest a lot in training of people, not just at the high levels, but at every level. But I just think there's something really unique about, or something really important about being able to grab that next idea, a new insight, travel to a new place. And that's one of the ways that's made us competitive over time. So the people that tend to do well at GE are people that are learners. The people that, if you're 25 years old and you think you know it all, you have no utility to us at all, right? If you're 60 years old and think you have a lot to learn, you have great utility to the company. And we take advantage of those things, and we tend to self-select inside the culture in terms of the way it goes. The luxury we have that, again, most of the companies in here have, but not everybody has, is we can pick and choose who we hire, right? We can develop our own training programs. We can develop our own apprentice programs, so we can kind of fight through the issue of secondary education not being as strong as it needs to or things like that. But as a society, we're not winning the education battle right now. I would say our universities are still the best in the world. Our high schools used to be the best in the world. They no longer are. And this, at the end of the day, is probably the single most important thing as a community we can work on. So we try to do those things, Alan, through our foundation and things like that. We do, I was in Asheville, North Carolina about a month ago, and I went to kind of a trade high school. So this was a high school that really had oriented itself towards teaching people skills with their hands. And we're hiring, let's say, 10 18-year-old kids from that high school, more or less every year, to go to work in an aviation factory down the road. Now, let's say there's 200 kids that are graduating from that school. Those 10 kids are going to lead a good life. They're going to get trained. They're going to have jobs that pay well, but they're all in the same pool. And the question is, how can we give all of them? How can we give more of them this chance to lead a great, productive life where they're making good money and things like that. And that's our challenge right now.
And that's the future. Another part of the future is addressing climate change. Mm-hmm. And you've been quite candid and outspoken on that for quite some time. Can you give us your view on how we address climate change and what you're thinking in that respect?
Yeah, so in 2004, we took a group of people at our research center, and we created kind of a red team, blue team scenario around, is climate change real? Is it caused by man? Some basic questions. Because at the end, I had no, I had no real environmental chops, right? I'm not a camper, basically, and stuff like that. So I didn't come to it. I'm a golfer, right? So I don't know how you, but I wasn't ideological about it at all. I just kind of said, look, this is about science, this is about technology. And I kind of convinced myself that it's real, that it's caused by man. I think it's hard to plot exactly, in 42 years, what's exactly going to happen. That's big linear programming models, but you should make your own choices. So we basically developed a business concept that we called eco-imagination. And the thrust really was around innovation, competitiveness, problem solving, and as ways to grow our company around the principle of reducing pollution, but not like creating winners and losers. So we basically said, look, every power plant, every oil field, every mine, everything in the world has a chance to be more energy efficient, more productive, and reduce pollution. So we weren't like a white glove, approach to it. We took let's make everybody more, kind of competitive. And that's, we've been doing that now 12 years, and we've had basically $300 billion of revenue cumulatively over that time period. And really, again, I don't pass judgment on people. Here in the U.S., I love being in the U.S., really. Our philosophy on the environment is different than Germany. Way different. Doesn't mean they're right, doesn't mean we're wrong, vice versa. It's just, and it's going to stay that way for a long time, right? And what's up to us is treat each region of the world differently so that we can create unique solutions that work in those countries. I was on President Obama's Jobs Council, and I used to say to him, look, every time people watch you in a meeting, like a G7 meeting, walk away and have a private conference with Angela Merkel, we break out in a cold sweat, because we don't want Germany's energy policy. We don't want that, right? But I say that as somebody that cares about the environment and things like that. It's just a different context. And so I think that's what we try to do, Alan, is take a very pragmatic approach to solving problems, one that's technically based, and one that really drives efficiency and things like that all at the same time.
Like a good mathematics major.
That, really, I would say to people, I almost never use my MBA, ever, really. I shouldn't have studied so hard, fundamentally. In fact, the only thing I use, I thought organizational behavior was for babies, I never thought it was like a real class. It's all I do now is organizational behavior. So I wish I had studied harder. But I use my math major every day. I have all these problems going on in my head all the time and things like that. So I shouldn't be that harsh on MBAs, but it was, you hire good MBAs, right? That's what you do. Yeah.
So we always go till 1:30 because we know you have tight schedules, and we're going to go till 1:30. Now, we have blue cards, as always, on the table. So if you have a question, I'm happy to talk to Jeff for days. About 5 o'clock, I want to bring us some different things to drink. But you deserve the honor of asking your questions. So we'll have people collecting those, so please do that. In the interim, I actually have spoken to some of Jeff's fraternity brothers, and we have some things they'd like to have answered. But before getting to that...
You're not allowed to do that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
He says he knows mine.
Yeah.
It'll get me in trouble. Before we do that, you mentioned the administration provides some opportunities for humor. And I understand that Alec Baldwin only has had one role in life that he liked better than playing the president.
Yeah.
And that was playing a character on 30 Rock that was allegedly modeled on you. And you were invited to come on that program, but you never did.
Yeah. So we owned NBC. We sold it in 2010. And probably in about 2005, Lorne Michaels, who does Saturday Night Live, is really one of the most impressive people I've ever met. He's just amazing what he's done. And he calls me and says, Look, I've done a show called 30 Rock, and the guys running the network won't pick it up. So I need you to intervene. And I almost would never do that, really, because once you do that, particularly with NBC, you're going to be doing that the rest of your life. So I almost always said no. But this was a guy I had such respect for. I said, just this once. So he came and we had dinner. He described the show, which became 30 Rock. And he said, Jeff, look, this is a funny show. Tina Fey's the writer. And you will always be proud of it as long as you live, 30 Rock. But I need you to shove it down their throat. So I shoved it down their throat, right? Now, the very first show, right, is like Tina Fey describing the COGE nude or something like that, right? So every show they dumped on GE, they trashed GE, and the show went for like 8 years. And the last episode, I had Lorne come, we had dinner, I said, it was an amazing show, right? The part about honoring GE, I didn't quite get that. When I watched all the episodes, I didn't see how that actually worked. But as you guys all know, things are only funny because they're true, right? So when you watch, like, I always identified with, with shows like that because you see enough of your daily life to think it's funny. Yeah.
One of my favorite shows, and
but one of the finest leaders I've ever met is Lorne Michaels. I've had a chance to be around incredible leaders, but talk about somebody who's run the show for 40 years, somebody that's changed with the times, that basically makes these, game time decisions and things like that. Really incredible talent and leader.
So how do you organize your immediate team? Who do you need reporting to you on a regular basis in order to run a company of the size and the diversity of GE? How do you make that work?
So I would say there's always a combination on a company like GE, there's always a combination of formal process and trust. So there's no way to run a company of this size without, so we have, almost 70% global, 330,000 people, 180 countries, 8 big businesses, things like that. So we have very, I would say, contemporary formal processes. And one of the changes we've made over the last couple years is to digitize them more and make them more contemporary. Like most companies, we grew up in a company where things were annual and things like that. We don't do anything on an annual cadence anymore. We do things monthly, quarterly, very, very rapid. You don't recreate presentations, you use the old presentation. So it's a way to keep information flowing, on a rapid basis, and we're very formal about it. We don't miss things, we don't push them off, things start on time. The right people are involved. The culture is one where bad news travels as fast as good news, things like that. So you get that. And then you just have to pick people you trust. I mean, David Joyce runs our aviation. Let's pick Lorenzo. Lorenzo runs our oil and gas business. He is traveling around the world all the time. The combined organization is going to be like 80,000 people or some incredible, incredible number of people. There's not enough oversight I could ever give to somebody that's running an enterprise like that. So I have to trust him. I have to say, here are the parameters, what the company needs, our investors need. This is how the company has to work, but you have to do it. And so, I probably spend 30% of my time on people because the only way you're going to build a system of trust is you have to know who the people are. And I probably, after 35 years in GE, I'm making this number up, but it's directional. I probably know 5,000 people by name, right? The 500 top people in the company, I know them deeply, right? I know who they are, their background, how they're compensated, things like that. So that's 30%. 30% on growth, just because look, over the last 10 or 15 years, I've probably come to Houston 4 times a year because I want to be known to the oil and gas executives, right? So I dedicate the time because I feel like with these high-risk projects, you need to be known to your customer base. 30% on problems, and let me tell you, we have plenty of them. And no matter how good you think you are, the problems will find you. So we work on those. And then 10% on governance, 10% on board stuff, investors, things like that. And that's, but the 30% on people is the only way the company can run because it's just so vast. And you just need trust. Yeah.
So we do have a few
Yeah,
cards
great.
already. You mentioned TPP earlier. TPP, one of the areas of standards it addressed was IP, intellectual property. So I have a question about how much of a concern for General Electric, and do you think for other multinational CEOs you talk to, is the threat of stolen technology, intellectual property, particularly when doing business in or with China?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. There's no doubt that over the years that's been a concern, and it's been a challenge. One of the things that's happened recently is as the Chinese kind of go up the scale from a standpoint of their own IP, they become more interested in protecting it themselves. So I think we've seen the laws get better in China, we've seen the adherence get better in China, but early on, the only way we could protect ourselves is that I basically got involved in every decision that was made in and around China for the last 15 years in terms of what we decided to put there, how we decided to go to market, because, look, I would say we won big on 5, we tied on 2, and maybe on 2 technologies, they took them from us. So, you know, you're not batting 1,000% when you're in these, but you can't let it be an excuse, really. When we first really tried to globalize the company, there's every excuse known to man in terms of why not go to India, why not go to China, why we can't win in Germany. I've heard every BS excuse known to man about why we can't do stuff. And I learned over time just to say, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear no. You know, I don't want to hear any of that stuff. I want you to go. I want you to go to Nigeria. I know it's like hard, right? I know nothing really works. They have a 40 gigawatt deficit of electricity. They're surrounded by natural gas. That sounds like a winner for GE, you know? Now, I don't know if it's this year or 10 years from now, but get off your butt and go. So I've never allowed those things to become kind of excuses about globalization. And I just think it's so easy to talk yourself out of going anywhere. I mean, I'm speaking to a crowd that's highly, I mean, probably I'm the only guest because all of you have lived in Kazakhstan and things like that. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. But if not in this room, not in a town like Houston, a lot of people just would rather excuse their way out of globalizing versus, you know, getting in the game. And really, globalization is something you have to feel from the ground up. Again, why did we get in trouble in globalization? Too many people saw it from New York City or London, and not enough people saw it from the ground. What jobs are being created? How do people work? How do you sell more things? You know, look, guys, I'm pro-NAFTA, really. I think NAFTA should be extended. But if you ask somebody to defend NAFTA today, what's the first thing they say? That's where my supply chain is. I have cheap labor there. That was okay in 1992. That's a loser in 2017. So everybody that's trying to defend NAFTA right now because of the supply chain, blah, 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 you're doing a disservice. The way to explain Mexico today is because it's a great market. It's a great place to sell U.S. products. So we're constantly running a 25-year-old play in 2017, and we wonder why people don't like us. You know, we wonder why people don't like us. You know, really, you know, and GE's done all this, so I'm not blaming anybody, but when you shut a factory in Indiana to move it to Mexico, you're not doing it to be a nice guy, right? You're doing it because you think it's cheaper. And I just think these kind of global moves sound good in New York City, but they sound crappy at home when you're home. So we just need to reframe the argument to make it more about markets and say, hey, the reason why NAFTA is a good idea is because Mexico finally can be a really great market. They're liberalizing Pemex, you know, yada, yada. This is the way to think about it. Not because, oh my God, you're going to pay more because my really cheap labor is so cheap, right? I don't know, anybody that watched the President Trump campaign knows that wasn't exactly his stump speech, right? So that's how globalization's got in trouble, I think, Alan.
So we have questions around R&D.
Yeah, great.
And the challenges that have been true, particularly in Houston, as budgets have been stressed, how much has been invested or not invested. So there's always cycles, different products, different times. What's your philosophy and the GE philosophy around R&D and how you...
You know, so it's a great question because clearly, you know, all of us get impacted by cycles. We're no exception, so we go through. I think the advantage we have to a certain extent is almost all the industries we're in are long cycle businesses. So if you're in the aviation business and you let's say you sit the wrong cycle out, it doesn't cost you for a year or two, it costs you for 30 years. So we're in a bunch of industries where if you miss a window, you don't miss for a quarter or two. And so it's made us, I think, more disciplined about how to stay the course, stay long term. And even while we go up and down, we've lived through the same oil and gas cycle you guys have. We tend to cut those things that are going to differentiate us over the long time. We tend to cut those last. So we've tried to sustain the ability to differentiate. And I think to a large extent, when we look at the moat we create, it's typically around technology. When I look at the differentiation we like to drive as a company, it's typically around technology. And I think that's important. We've invested, let's say last year, we invested $4 billion in digital and $2 billion in additive manufacturing. And we had to find that money inside the company. So we had to find that money by reallocating and doing a lot less of certain things to do more of other things. And I think that's what good leaders do. I was running our healthcare business in the late 90s, and I had a tough boss, right? A guy named Jack Welch. And I presented to him, we wanted to do digital x-ray. Now, this sounds, I'm dating myself, this sounds digital x-ray like, yeah, what's the innovation, But in those days, it was all film-based, so we had a digital panel, proprietary panel, and let's say it was going to cost $100 million to go do that. And I didn't have it. It was a tough cycle in the healthcare business. And so Welch says, I think that's a great idea, but you get no relief and no money. Go figure it out. Or dump it if you want to dump it. So I went back and I found like $30 million. And then I went to the supplier and said, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to buy the technology from me and we'll do a long-term take or pay. And so that's how I got my $100 million. So what I ended up with was a higher product cost, but I got to the market first, right? And that proved to my boss that I was resourceful, that I didn't take no for an answer, things like that. So then I become CEO 5 years later, and the X-ray product manager is presenting to me. And he said, look, we're really gaining share, but our margins are terrible because some dope signed a take-or-pay contract, 5 years ago. I can't believe how stupid they were, And I said, look, you just kind of had to be there. Cut me some slack, I didn't have any better ideas at the time, right? So in some ways, it's a test for everybody in this room. We don't make you as good when we give you what you ask for, right? If we just give you what you ask for, you're never going to become good. If we give you what you need and you figure out the rest, then you become good leaders over time. I had dinner with the Baker Hughes guys last night, and I say, look, one of the reasons why I hate to say this, but one of the reasons why I became COG is because I didn't follow the rules, So now I'm the guy that makes the rules. So I don't want to tell you, don't follow my rules. But
I think you just did. But
I want you to know that, sometimes, we love the people that solve problems for us, even when it's difficult. Those are the people that tend to break out of the pack.
So we have a couple of questions that really go to the question I asked you before about how GE's having its own foreign policy, if you will, being in 180 countries. So I think they really are trying to get to, how do you do that in 180 countries? Are you apolitical in general, selective on where you use your weight, if you will? How do you address government?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is it's not. I think we train our people to see that each country is different, and they do that by being on the ground. So even in Europe, we have a huge presence in Europe. So we have like 90,000 people in Europe, but we don't view Europe as Europe. Germany is different than France, is different than Denmark, is different than the UK. Well, the UK is not in Europe anymore. So, so a very highly differentiated strategies. We have kind of what I would call a mental balance of trade in terms of we know what we buy in every country in the world, we know what we sell in every country. In other words, we know what we make, we know what we sell, so we have a mental balance of trade. We tend to have local teams, so we tend to have either local nationals with a few expats who are kind of our face, if you will, in the region. We're proud to be an American. We don't identify ourselves as a global company. We always identify ourselves as an American company. We are proud to be an American company. You know, the only thing I say is, look, what we can't do is we can't go home and cry when we don't do TPP. You know, in other words, we have to kind of take things the way they come and not be overly defensive about it. So we're a proudly American company. But I'd say the most important thing, Alan, is we're on the ground. You know, we're on the ground. And, you know, in 2012, Khalid Al-Fallah, who's been a friend of mine for a long time, he said, look, you've been living off the land in Saudi. You're taking advantage of our country. You need to localize more here. And we invested $1 billion. We didn't necessarily want to, but he was clear, and he said, this is the roadmap of where the kingdom's going. Get on board, or you're not going to, it's not going to be successful for you for the long term. Now, so I go home and say, look, we're going to build a gas turbine factory. We're going to localize wellheads. We're going to build a business process outsourcing center with 3,000 Saudi women. We run the play, right? And I gather my team and run the play. You know, the body language from the team is, we don't want to. It's going to make our plants less efficient. It's harder to do, blah, blah, blah. So at that moment in time, it's 30 against 1 inside GE. So I've talked to the customer. I brought the message back from the customer. I'm now presenting it to the team. The team says, we don't want to. You know, at that moment in time, you basically say, and you can only say this maybe 4 times a year, I've got a good idea today, do it my way. Don't ask questions, do it my way. Now, if you do that 5 times every year, good people will leave. And if you never do that, the company never changes. So what you want as a leader is to build enough trust where 4 times a year you can come and say, the kingdom needs this. I know it makes you less efficient. We're going to figure out a way to make that up. Here's what we have to do. And what I've always liked about our company is people get the message and go. And so that's how you've had to globalize. Really, the easiest thing to do would be to have one mega factory in, like, Tennessee and ship everything we made, you know, everywhere in the world. It would be like, you know, 300,000 workers, be efficient, lean, except nobody's going to buy your stuff. Brazil's got localization requirements, or this country has something else, or you have to figure out a way to do things in Europe, you know. So it's just see the world from the ground up. See every person, they have a future. Learn to listen with the intent of learning. Travel more than talk. Ask good questions. You know, don't tell somebody, here's what you should do. Learn to tell people, here's what I would do if I were you. And if you do all those things, and if you burn up shoe leather, and you do it year after year after year, time after time after time, that's what globalization is all about, right? It's not, 30 years ago, it was about trade deals in DC. It was about the WTO. It was about the UN. It was about all those things. I'm not saying those things aren't important today. I'm just saying if you don't see it from the ground up today, you can't be a viable global leader in the world. Now, again, I'm speaking to a crowd that actually knows that because you are on the ground. You know, all of you are central to Nigeria or Kazakhstan or the places you go. So you get this probably better than both in the oil field service business and in the upstream business. But that's not something that's typically felt in terms of how most global people see the world.
Jeff, those are great words of wisdom for anybody of any age. But as a last question, you know we have students here, and that's our real long-term goal, is to help them. So you and I look at, you know, the last 60 years, and we've seen lots of ups and downs, but the tumultuous period we've had this century is all some people have seen in their life so far. What can you say to our students about, you know, how they should look at the world today and how they should look forward?
I think it's a great question. You know, I have a daughter who's 30, and basically she doesn't know what a 3% GDP U.S. looks like, really, right? So, you know, when she turns on TV and watches Bernie Sanders, she thinks some of what he says makes sense. until I talk to her and say, turn that shit off. You know, so no, that's not what I say, really. You know, but I think you have to. You know, our kids, all the young kids here, you know, they're just in a sea of disruption, and I think what we need to dream about them is that they're resilient, right? That they're learners, that they take things as they come, that they're not hung up that tomorrow is going to be different than today. So their future is, you know. So I joined GE in 1982. Up until 9/11, I had never seen a tail risk event, right? I had never seen something that you couldn't envision the day before. I'd seen recessions, I'd seen a couple bad cycles, but you can envision those. But think about the last 15 years, the global financial crisis, 9/11, Fukushima, BP oil spill. I mean, I could go down the list. We've seen one event after another for the past 15 years, and now picture that you're 18 years old. So we need a resiliency, a sense of learning, not being, every 20-year-old should learn how to code. Not because they're going to be software engineers, but because they need to know the art of the possible as it pertains to where the digital industries are going to go. Everybody, we should treat things like life sciences as a liberal art. Why? Because healthcare is going to be 25% of the US GDP. You know, we talk about having a new healthcare plan. We're going to be working on healthcare every day for the rest of our lives, really. If you're an American, you're signed up to work on healthcare. So, you know, they need to have different fundamental skills than we had because of where the world's going. But what we really, you know, I often quote the great philosopher Mike Tyson. He's got this great sign. He's got this great phrase that says, everybody has a strategy until they get punched in the nose. And unfortunately, everybody that graduates from high school and goes into college, they're going to live in a sea of volatility that's very different than what we saw when we were coming out of you know, high school and college. And there's just nothing we can, you know, it's a more interconnected world. It's just there's nothing we can do to protect them from it. And that, I think, is how you teach for that, boy, I don't know. But that's the world they're going to see.
Jeff, this has been an incredible pleasure and a great honor.
Great, Alan. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much. Good. Just if I can, look, we are big in Houston as a company, probably more than 10,000 people. We've got a great team here, not just in the oil and gas business, but across GE. And it's very important that they're a part of this town. So thanks for being welcoming to them, and you should lean on them to be a good part of the town of Houston. So, well, good.
In conclusion, I would like to thank Alan Crane and Jeff Immelt as our honoree. This was a very insightful conversation, so thanks so much for your remarks, and thanks for coming, for taking the award. I also would like to thank all of you for coming and for sponsoring this really important event. This is our major fundraiser, and it's really critical to the organization, so thank you all for being here. And I also want to make sure we thank our particular high sponsors, Chevron as the underwriting sponsor. And we also want to thank our platinum sponsors, Baker Hughes, ConocoPhillips, Deloitte, and GE. And this event would not have been possible without the lead of our interim executive director, Sanjay Bayat, and all the staff who supported her, as well as the volunteers. So thanks so much for everybody to be here. And I'm really hoping that I see you all in some of our future events. The World Affairs Council puts great events on. I know May 31st, don't forget, Venezuela, and then we'll go a little bit in a summer break, but we'll be back strong in the fall. And have everybody a great day, and thanks for coming.